So in chapter 6 and chapter 7, we talked about finding a purpose, doing original research. And in chapter 8, we're going to discuss how to support the ideas that we have and how to build arguments. So we're going to look at ways to use research as a support, look at some different types of support, and then finally looking at how to use that support and create arguments in our speeches. So support in general refers to strategies that are used to develop the central idea or thesis and the specific purpose by providing corroborating evidence. So you are finding support or finding things that help you defend or explain the claims that you're making. We use support for a variety of reasons. One is to clarify content. Second is to add credibility. So we want the audience to see us as credible. Again, things you need to look at are accuracy, authority, recency, and objectivity. We just talked about those things in chapter 7, but it is important to look at those things when you're evaluating research. And then the third way we use support is to add vividness and to paint pictures for our audience. Several different types of support, and you want to use a variety of support in your speeches. Our facts and statistics, so numerical data, that can be very helpful for showing the magnitude of problems or showing how big something is. It's good quantitative information. There are several different types of definitions you can use. So the lexical definition is a definition that's from the dictionary. Persuasive definitions are definitions that are used to change how you believe or act about certain things. Stipulative definitions are definitions that are named after certain things or people. And then theoretical definitions are definitions that tell you how something works in practice and explains vaguely what things are about. There are several different types of examples. So a positive example is an example that tells you, this is what you want to do. It's a good example of that. A negative example would be examples of things you don't want to do. So if I said, you want to have good study habits, like making sure you read the textbook and that you watch the highlight video, and you want to avoid bad study habits like waiting until the last minute to complete assignments or cheating off of a friend. Those are positive and negative examples. There can be non-examples. So if you were to say, define a term that one your book looks at as crisis management and say, here's an example of somebody who did not have good crisis management. And then a best example is really just a positive example that is best for that situation in context. Narratives is another type of support. Narratives are simply stories that people tell, and they can be informative, persuasive, or entertaining stories that all provide support in a different way. Testimony can include expert testimony, so somebody who's an expert in the field. If I were talking about a new medication, that would be a doctor or a pharmacist or a scientist. And then eyewitness testimony is someone who has personally witnessed or experienced the topic. So it could be someone who has taken the medicine and can tell you the side effects that they've had from it. You can also use analogies or figurative analogies, compare things that aren't similar but allow you to paint a picture between those things. And then literal analogies compare things literally. So if I were to look at fast food restaurants, I could compare, Chick-fil-A to Popeyes. Some things you want to consider when creating arguments is that arguments are based on statements divided into two categories. The first is the premise, which is a statement designed to provide support or evidence. And then the second is a conclusion, which is a statement that can be clearly drawn based on the premise. So if I said, 80% of 16-year-old drivers are distracted and 75% of deaths of 16-year-olds are caused by distracted driving, the conclusion I might come from that is that we should raise the driving age to 18, or we need to include more driver safety for those that are 16. So you include premises that support the conclusion that you're going to make. Next is you have to provide support for your arguments to be seen as credible. You can't just make claims and not support them. Some things I want you to consider when you're using support is that you want to use a variety of supporting types. People are persuaded and informed in different ways. And so if you rely solely on statistical information, people might become bored by that. If you use only narratives and testimony, people may be looking for more quantitative information. So the more that you can combine the types of support that you have, the more whole your speech is going to be. You want to look and make sure you're using appropriate forms of support, both for your audience, topic, and occasion. Make sure that it's relevant to your topic and audience. Don't go overboard. We want to hear your voice in the speech, and so don't just have it full of support and not any of your claims at all. And never manipulate your support. You don't want to twist it to say something that it does not say. When you're using support in your speech, you can use quotations, paraphrasing, summaries, numerical support, pictographic support, which are just visual aids and other presentation aids that you can use. In each of those situations, Chapter 8 does a really good job of giving you some tips and ways to use those. In general, remember, we want to hear your voice and we want that to be supported. So find good ways to incorporate your support there. When you're looking at your outline, one of the things that you want to consider is, do I have enough support? And there are some ways that you can do that. The first is there's a process called reverse outlining that Chapter 8 talks about, where you start at your conclusion and go backwards. So you want to make sure that you are supporting each of the claims that you're making. Have you put enough support in to support the claim or the final claim that you've made in the conclusion of the speech? And then look, just as you're looking over your outline, are all of your claims supported? So am I supporting each of the statements that I'm making? And then finally, remember that in addition to putting the sources in your outline, you do have to cite them orally in the speech. And this is where a lot of people mess up in the speeches a lot, but you have to say them verbally. And there are three parts of that. The first is the setup. So you tell us where the information is coming from. So according to the New York Times on September 2nd, the execution is the information that you provide. So according to the New York Times on September 2nd, 60% of students under the age of 16 are involved in distracted driving. And then the most important part is you tell us what it means, which is the analysis setup. So I can say, you know, according to the New York Times, 60% of students are distracted driving. This clearly means something needs to change in terms of driver's ed, or whatever the claim is that I'm making there. So that's Chapter 8. It gives you a good idea of what to do and how to use support that is there. It's very important that you support your claims and that you make sure your arguments are developed. Thank